My name is Elena Parker, and I am a 25-year-old English teacher at a private high school. It was my first year of teaching. I was nervous, hopeful, and ready to prove myself. That morning, I entered the class with a smile, carrying my lesson plan and dreams. The students stood up and greeted, "Good morning, Miss Parker." But one boy in the back caught my eye. He didn't greet me. He just smiled softly, and a calm, confident smile that stayed in my mind. His name was Liam Carter, 18 years old, quiet, intelligent, and mysterious. I didn't know then that this student would change my life forever. The connection. Over the next few weeks, I noticed Liam's brilliance. He rarely talked, but his essays were full of emotion and depth. He wrote about loneliness, loss, and dreams, words that touched my heart. One evening, he stayed after class. "Miss Parker," he said softly, "I like your way of teaching. You make words feel alive." His voice was sincere, and something inside me melted. I smiled, trying to stay professional. "Thank you, Liam, that means a lot." But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about him. The unspoken feelings. Weeks passed. He began staying late, helping me arrange books, cleaning the board, talking about poetry. We shared our favorite writers, our dreams, and sometimes our pain. I discovered he had lost his mother 2 years ago, and maybe that's why he understood emotions so deeply. One day, as we stood by the window during a rainy evening, he said, "Miss Parker, you're the only person who listens to me." And I felt tears in my eyes, because he was the only person who truly saw me. The forbidden moment. It happened one day after school. We were working on his essay about love that cannot be. He looked up and said, "Do you believe love can be wrong?" I hesitated. Sometimes love comes at the wrong time. He whispered, "What if I told you I'm in love with someone I can't have?" My heart pounded. I wanted to say no. I wanted to stop the feeling growing inside me. But when his eyes met mine, I couldn't look away. We didn't touch. We didn't speak further. But in that silence, love was born. The pain of distance. I started avoiding him. I changed his seat. I gave him less attention. I tried to act normal, but his eyes always found mine. Every smile, every word, every silence was heavy with what we couldn't say. After exams, he came to say goodbye. "I'm leaving for university," he said softly. "I'll never forget you." I smiled through my tears. "Be great, Liam. Be everything you dream to be." And then he left, taking my heart with him. Years later, 3 years passed. I became more experienced, colder, distant, but my heart never healed. One afternoon, while teaching, I heard someone knock at the classroom door. It was him, Liam. Older, confident, holding flowers. He smiled, the same gentle smile. "I'm not your student anymore, Miss Parker," he said softly. "Can I take you out for coffee?" And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to smile freely, because sometimes love waits, patiently, quietly, until it's finally allowed to be real. After his return. The moment Liam walked into my classroom again, time stood still. My heart forgot how to beat. 3 years had passed, yet the memory of his eyes, that same warmth, that same sadness, came flooding back. He placed the bouquet of lilies on my desk. "For you," he said. "I never forgot your favorite flower." I froze. "You remembered?" He nodded gently. "I remember everything, Miss Parker. Every word, every lesson, every moment." I wanted to say, "Please don't call me that anymore," but something in me loved hearing it again. Coffee after years. We met that evening at a quiet cafe near the school, the same one I often went to alone after classes. He looked different, more mature, more confident, yet still humble. He talked about his university life, his writing, how he started publishing poetry. "I used to write about you," he confessed softly. "Every word was you, the one who taught me that feelings aren't weaknesses." I looked down, tears threatening to fall. "Liam, you shouldn't have waited for me." He smiled faintly. "Some people are worth waiting for." The storm. Inside. That night, I couldn't sleep. My heart was battling with my mind. He was no longer my student, yet my conscience still whispered that it was wrong. I stood by my window, looking at the moon, whispering, "What are you doing, Elena? You're his past. He deserves someone his age." But deep inside, a voice answered, "He chose you. He saw your soul when no one else did." The visit days turned into weeks. Liam started visiting my school more often. He volunteered for reading programs, helped with literature workshops, and everyone admired him. He was charming, kind, and respected. One afternoon, as I was packing my books, he stood beside me. "Can I walk you home?" I hesitated but nodded. We walked in silence. When we reached my apartment gate, he said softly, "Do you ever think about that day? The essay on love that cannot be?" I turned to him, my throat tight. "I think about it every day." He stepped closer, his voice trembling. "And do you still believe love came at the wrong time?" My eyes filled with tears. "Yes, but maybe now it's the right one." The first embrace. It was raining again, like that day years ago. We stood under the same umbrella, hearts remembering everything we never said. He reached for my hand, slowly, carefully, as if afraid to break the silence. I didn't pull away. When he wrapped his arms around me, it felt like coming home after years of being lost. He whispered, "I loved you when I wasn't allowed to, and I love you now, when I finally can." For the first time, I didn't stop him, because love, no matter how forbidden once, had found its moment to breathe. The gossip. But the world isn't always kind. When people saw us together, whispers began. Parents, teachers, even old students started talking. "She's dating her former student. It's inappropriate." I tried to stay strong, but inside I was breaking. The school board called me for a meeting. They didn't fire me, but they reminded me that reputation matters. That night, I sat in my car crying. Liam found me, held my hand, and said, "I'll talk to them." But I shook my head. "No, Liam, don't fight for me. Just love me silently." Letters in secret. For months, we didn't meet in public, but every week, he left a letter in my mailbox, poems, memories, hopes, and I wrote back, words soaked in longing. One of his letters read, "You were my teacher, but you became my world. You taught me grammar, and I learned love in between your words." Every line made me both ache and smile. The choice. One afternoon, he came to my apartment again. "Elena," he said seriously, "I got a scholarship abroad for my master's." My heart dropped. "That's wonderful," I whispered, though tears filled my eyes. He held my face gently. "I don't want to leave you." I smiled sadly. "You have to go. You have dreams to chase. Don't stay for me." He pressed his forehead against mine. "You'll wait for me, won't you?" I nodded, whispering, "Always." The years of waiting. He left, and the silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd known. Seasons changed. I grew older, but every birthday, every rainy day, I remembered him. Sometimes his letters came from faraway places. Sometimes they didn't. But I kept believing love that pure never dies. The return again. 5 years later, I was in the library teaching creative writing to new students. A familiar voice said, "Miss Parker, do you still teach love that cannot be?" I turned and there he was, older, stronger, eyes still shining with the same light. I dropped my pen and laughed through my tears. "You came back." He smiled, holding a small box. "I came back to make it possible." Inside was a ring. Simple, silver, beautiful. He knelt and said, "You were my teacher. But more than that, you were my heart. Now, let me be your student forever. In love." The quiet life. After our small, private wedding, life felt peaceful, yet unreal. Some nights, I would wake up and watch him sleeping beside me, still unable to believe he was real, no longer my student, but my husband, my partner, my peace. He continued his work as a writer and lecturer. I continued teaching, but in another city, far from the school where it all began. We promised each other one thing. We would live quietly, without needing the world's approval. But even peace has shadows, because some people never forget the past. The article. One morning, while having breakfast, Liam's face turned pale as he read the newspaper. There it was. A headline: "Teacher marries her former student. The forbidden love that found its way." Someone from our old town had written about us. The article spread online within hours. Comments were cruel. She took advantage of him. He was too young. She should be ashamed. I cried that night. Silently, Liam held me tight, whispering, "Let them talk. Elena, they don't know our story." They never saw the years we waited. But inside, I broke again, the same way I had years ago when the world first judged us. His book. A few months later, Liam came to me with a small notebook. He said, "I've been writing something. It's our story." I looked at the cover. Between the lines, a love that waited. It wasn't a romantic novel full of fantasy. It was truth. Raw, honest, emotional truth. He wrote about the pain of loving silently, the guilt, the distance, the waiting. But also about courage, the courage to love when the world calls it wrong. When the book was published, it became a quiet success. People cried reading it. Some wrote letters saying it gave them hope to believe in love again. And that's when I realized, maybe our story existed not to be hidden, but to heal others. The baby 2 years later, we had a baby girl, Liana. The moment I held her in my arms, I felt life come full circle. She had his eyes, calm, bright, full of love. One evening, as I watched Liam play with her, I whispered, "She'll grow up knowing love is not about rules, it's about respect." He smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "She'll grow up knowing her mother was brave." Thackeray never sent. One rainy afternoon, while cleaning his desk, I found a letter inside his old notebook. It was dated 5 years before our wedding, when he was still abroad. It read, "Dear Miss Parker, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I want to say thank you. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. Thank you for teaching me words and showing me how to feel them. I still think of that rainy day in the classroom. The silence, your eyes, the moment I knew I was in love. I'm not sure if life will ever let us meet again. But if it does, I'll make sure the world sees you the way I do. Not as my teacher, but as the woman who taught me what real love means." Tears streamed down my face as I read it. That young boy, so full of emotion, had become the man who loved me more than I ever deserved. The illness life was beautiful, until one winter morning, Liam fainted in his study. The doctors said it was exhaustion at first, but later, they found something worse, a heart condition. He was only 32. The nights that followed were the hardest of my life. He would smile through pain, saying, "I'm okay, Elena, don't cry. I still have words to write." But I saw how weak he was becoming. I sat by his bed every night, reading his favorite poems. And one night, he whispered, "Promise me something. If one day I can't be here, keep telling our story. Let people know. Love can exist anywhere, even between impossible hearts." I held his hand, trembling. "Don't talk like that, Liam. You'll live. You promised to grow old with me." He smiled weakly. "I did. And I will, even if not in body, then in words. The goodbye." He passed away quietly. 3 months later, on a rainy evening, the same kind of day we first met. I sat beside him, holding his hand until it went cold. The world felt empty, silent, meaningless. I buried him with a copy of his book, the one that told our story. On his gravestone, I wrote, "He learned love in words, but lived it in silence." Her legacy, years passed. Liana grew up, bright and kind, just like him. She loved books, poetry, and sometimes she would ask, "Mom, can you tell me the story of how you met Dad again?" And every time I would smile through my tears and say, "It began in a classroom, when a teacher met a student who changed her life." I never hid our story from her, because love, even when it breaks you, deserves to be remembered. The Diary in the Attic. It was a quiet Sunday morning. The sun slipped gently through the curtains, painting golden lines across the old wooden floor. Liana was now 21, studying literature at the same university her father once attended. After breakfast, she went up to the attic, searching through boxes of old papers for a childhood album. Instead, she found a small leather notebook, worn, faded, tied with a red ribbon. On the cover, in her father's handwriting, were the words, "To my teacher, the love I could never say out loud." Her breath caught. She sat on the floor, trembling fingers untying the ribbon, and began to read. The words of a young heart. "I see her every day, yet I cannot tell her. She smiles, and the world feels right. She says my name in class, and my heart forgets how to beat. I know it's wrong. I know she's my teacher. But when she speaks about love and poetry, I feel every word is meant for me." Liana's tears fell onto the pages. She read line after line, the diary of a young man who had loved deeply, silently, fearfully. If love is a sin, I'll gladly be guilty, because she taught me not just English, but the language of my soul. By the time she reached the last page, her heart was aching and full of pride. The conversation. That evening, she went to her mother's room. Elena was sitting by the window, reading one of Liam's old poems, her hair now streaked with silver. "Mom," Liana said softly, holding out the diary, "I found this." Elena froze. Her eyes fell on the cover, and her hands began to shake. "I thought it was lost," she whispered, smiling through tears. "I gave it to him when he was 18, told him to write his heart in it. I never knew he kept it all these years." They sat together, reading it page by page. Sometimes they laughed, sometimes they cried, and sometimes they simply held hands in silence, both feeling his presence in every word. Liana's promise. After that night, Liana couldn't stop thinking about her father's diary. She wanted the world to feel what he had felt. the innocence, the courage, the pain. So she began writing her own book, The Teacher's Lesson. It was told through her eyes, a daughter growing up in the shadow of a love story the world once judged, but time later blessed. Her writing was emotional, powerful, pure. Publishers called it a masterpiece born from legacy. The book became famous worldwide, not as a scandal, but as a tribute to love that waited, endured, and taught generations. The speech, a year later, Liana was invited to speak at a literature conference. Thousands of people came, readers, students, professors. She stood on stage, her father's diary in her hands. Her voice trembled at first, then grew steady. My parents taught me something no classroom ever could. They taught me that love isn't about age or time or approval. It's about two souls recognizing each other, even when the world doesn't understand. My father was her student once, but in truth, they both became each other's teachers. The crowd was silent. Then applause filled the hall. Long, endless, emotional, the visit to his grave. After the event, Liana drove to the old cemetery where her father rested. She placed her book beside his grave, the same place where his first book lay buried with him years ago. "Dad," she whispered, "your words never died. They became my heartbeat." The wind blew gently, carrying the scent of rain. For a moment, she felt a warmth on her shoulder, as if someone invisible had placed a comforting hand there. She smiled through her tears. "I think Mom was right," she said softly. Love never really leaves. It just changes form. The final lesson. Later that evening, Elena joined her at the grave. The sky was turning orange, and the world felt quiet and kind. Elena placed a lily, his favorite, on the stone and whispered, "You see, Liam, she became a writer, just like you." Liana smiled and leaned against her mother. "Maybe one day," she said softly, "someone will read our story and realize love isn't forbidden. It's just waiting for the right time." They stood together, watching the sunset, two generations connected by the same love, the same rain, the same hope. Epilogue. The lesson that lived forever. Years later, long after Elena passed peacefully in her sleep, Liana continued to share their story. Schools started teaching. Between the lines and the teacher's lesson in literature classes around the world, students read and cried, teachers reflected. Everyone learned that love, real love, isn't about breaking rules. It's about the courage to feel deeply, to wait, and to forgive time itself. On the last page of the final edition, Liana wrote,